Today, we're diving into something that's, well, pretty profound. We're going to reframe how we think about religious knowledge, not just as a list of do's and don'ts, but as a real spiritual journey. It's all about finding the kind of knowledge that can literally transform our entire lives into an act of worship.
So, let me start by asking you something. Think about your day. You know, the usual routine. Is it just a checklist of things you have to get done? Or could it be something more? That's really the question we're exploring today. How do we turn the most mundane, everyday things into something sacred?
The goal, as one source puts it, is to move from just inherited ways of learning to becoming a true servant of Allah, It's about moving beyond doing things just because that's how we were taught or that's how it's always been done. It's about stepping into a truly conscious, intentional relationship with God. So, let's get into it.
So, where do we even begin with something that big? Well, we start at the foundation, the pursuit of knowledge itself. And listen, this isn't about becoming a walking encyclopedia. It's about building the bedrock for a conscious spiritual life.
So, what kind of knowledge are we actually talking about here? The sources have a name for it: beneficial knowledge. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's not just any old information. It is specifically the knowledge that draws you closer to Allah and, crucially, gives you the tools you need to worship Him the right way.
And here's the thing. Seeking this knowledge isn't just a suggestion. It's considered an individual duty, or fard ayn. That means it's an obligation on every single one of us. And why is it so important? Well, because it makes sure your worship is actually valid, it gets you ready for that day of accountability, and it's what takes you from being a passive follower to a true servant who actually understands the why behind it all.
This really drives home just how serious this is. The sources highlight that every single one of us will be asked why we didn't know. I mean, especially today, with information literally at our fingertips, saying, "I just didn't know," isn't really an easy out. The thought of that private meeting with God, that's a powerful motivator to really understand our faith.
Okay, so knowing the rules is step one. But what is it that really brings that knowledge to life? That brings us to our next point, the incredible power of intention, or niyyah. This is the how. It's the secret ingredient that turns knowledge into worship.
And this idea it's a game changer. Think about it. Cooking a meal is just a chore, right? But what if you're cooking with the intention to nourish your family for the sake of Allah? Suddenly, it's an act of worship that you're rewarded for. Same with taking a shower. Are you just getting clean, or are you purifying yourself to please God? It's the exact same action, but that tiny internal shift makes a world of spiritual difference.
But, and this is a huge but, there's a critical warning here. If your intention for seeking knowledge is all about worldly stuff, like getting a fancy title or having people praise you, it loses all of its spiritual weight. The action might look the same on the outside, but it's the niyyah that decides whether it's for God or just for this world.
Okay, so we've covered the why, the pursuit of knowledge, and the how, the power of intention. Now let's get into the what. Let's apply these ideas to some of the most practical, day-to-day questions about worship and purity.
This is one of those really foundational pieces of knowledge. During menstruation, not praying and not fasting is in itself an act of obedience. But you've got to notice the key difference here. Any prayers you miss, you don't have to make them up, which is seen as a mercy because there are so many. But any missed fast from Ramadan, those absolutely have to be made up later. Another super common question is about interacting with the Quran. Now, out of respect for the physical sacred text, the Mus'haf, it's generally not permitted to touch it directly without a barrier during this time. But here's what's so important for us today. In our digital world, it is clearly permissible to read from your phone or a tablet. This is huge because it means that connection to the Quran never has to stop.
Now this right here, this is a crucial mindset shift that reframes the whole conversation. Being in a state of ritual impurity is temporary. It only affects certain acts of worship. It does not mean the person herself becomes impure. A believer, in their very essence, is always considered pure.
So, once the cycle is over, a ritual bath or ghusl is needed to return to a state of ritual purity. Now, the bare minimum is just to make sure water touches every part of your body. But this is the more detailed sunnah method, which follows the practice of the Prophet and, of course, carries an extra reward.
Okay, but we all know that the what of worship isn't always so black and white, is it? And that brings us to our next section, how to navigate the reality of scholarly differences and the practical concessions that are really a part of the faith's wisdom.
This is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. If you look at the different schools of thought, or madhabs, the technical definition of how long a menstrual cycle can be actually varies.
Now, this isn't a contradiction. It's a recognized and respected part of Islamic law, and it just shows that there can be different valid interpretations of the source texts.
So what about those tricky, real-world situations? Picture this. You're on a long flight or stuck somewhere without access to water, and the time for prayer is about to run out. What do? Does that just mean you missed the prayer?
Absolutely not. The faith provides a beautiful concession called tayammum, or dry purification. It's truly a mercy from Allah. It allows you to use clean earth to purify yourself symbolically, which ensures that your connection to prayer is never, ever broken by circumstances that are out of your control.
All right, let's start to bring all these different threads together now. We've talked about why we seek knowledge, how to bring it to life with intention, and what some of the practical rules look like. The ultimate goal here is to build a completely holistic life of worship.
And this framework right here is an amazing tool for that. In Islamic law, basically every single thing a person can do falls into one of these 5 categories. Once you understand this, you can start to see your entire life, from your obligatory prayers all the way down to the simple act of drinking a glass of water, through a lens of divine purpose. You know what's required, what's encouraged, what's neutral, and what to stay away from.
And this brings us to one last really beautiful idea. Worship isn't only about doing an action, it's about submission. So obeying the command to not pray during your period is just as much an act of worship as praying when you are commanded to. The goal, in the end, is always submission to God's will.
So we want to leave you with this final thought. Thinking about everything we've talked about, from beneficial knowledge to the simple power of intention, what is one ordinary thing you're going to do today? And how can you elevate it from just being a task on your to-do list into a meaningful conversation with your Creator? Thanks for tuning in.